When you think of the world, this is probably the map that comes to mind. It's everywhere. Atlases, school walls, even Google Maps. It's also very, very wrong, and it's been distorting our view of the world for centuries. This is a Mercator projection. It's one of the most common projections used for world maps. This guy, Gerardus Mercator, created it in 1569 to help with ship navigation. The map was revolutionary because it straightened both lines of latitude and longitude, which was great for sailing. All you had to do was draw a line to where you wanted to go on the map and follow your compass. But to make a navigation-friendly map, the projection distorts landmasses the closer they are to the poles. That gives us the wrong idea about the relative size and maybe even the importance of some regions. This creates what some map makers call the Greenland problem. This is Greenland on Mercator's map. It's huge. Here, Greenland is bigger than the entire continent of South America. The same thing happens with Alaska. The state looks bigger than the entire country of Mexico. The farther land is from the equator on a Mercator map, the more stretched out it looks. In reality, South America is 8 times the size of Greenland, and Mexico is actually bigger than Alaska. For the same reason, this is what 2,000 miles looks like on a Mercator map, but so is this. It's the same distance, the fault is in the map. This happens because map makers have to rely on mathematical formulas to project the surface of the Earth, a sphere, onto the surface of a map, a plane. Calculus and complex algebra eventually improved map projections, yet the Mercator stubbornly remained a popular general world map. While it made for a great navigation map, it was also being used as a geographic map in classrooms and atlases. The distorted view of Earth's landmasses in a Mercator's projection became how people saw the world. Map makers and geographers were not happy. Everything started to change in the mid-20th century. There was a world war, and more airplanes were being used than ever before. Editorials published in the New York Times in the 40s called for the Mercator to be discarded and reminded readers the grossness of its errors should not be forgotten. In a series of orthographic maps in 1942 and 43, Fortune magazine declared the Mercator is no map for global war, and it was a dangerous map to use in studying global strategy. An expose on cartography Life published around the same time called the Mercator a mental hazard in a war that is plotted on great circles across the land and sea and through the air. Perhaps nowhere was the rejection of Mercator's projection more apparent than with Richard Eads Harrison's illustrations. The architect turned illustrator for Fortune magazine created maps truly fit for a world dominated by flight, offering revolutionary views of the planet as World War II raged. With Harrison's maps, it was clear just how obvious the United States' isolation was, or how many neighbors Europe had. It was at this time that maps were starting to take on a new use: persuasion.
This union of 12 nations became known as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or more simply, NATO.
Suddenly, maps became a convenient way to show just how threatening Germany's neighbor Czechoslovakia was, when it really wasn't, or how imperative it was to fight communism, or how threatening other countries were to the USSR. A transverse oblique homolographic map does wonders for showing how close and how threatening the USSR really was in this Times Atlas map. Eventually, a German historian created what he said was a revolutionary map projection that he marketed as the solution to the Mercator. For Arno Peters, the Mercator represented Western imperialism. His new projection, with a more prominent Africa and South America, was meant to emphasize what he called the Third World. Reactions ranged from cautious amusement to outright hostility. Peters had trashed the cartographic community in writings promoting his map, and his version really wasn't even that original. A Scottish clergyman named James Gall had created virtually the same thing in 1885. Eventually, the American Congress on Surveying and Mapping stepped in and had a resolution. The organization and 6 other cartographic groups urged map publishers, the media, and government agencies to stop using rectangular depictions like the Gall-Peters and Mercator for general purposes. The answer to the Greenland problem was not a new rectangular map, but instead non-rectangular projections like the Mole-Wide or the Eckhart 4. The media picked up the resolution. There was a column in the Washington Post, and it even made it to the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Right there. The Gall-Peters hasn't gone away. Boston Public Schools recently said it will now use the Gall-Peters in classrooms to quote-unquote decolonize the curriculum. But it's not like the Gall-Peters is replacing all maps. You can find different types of maps everywhere. The UN logo has an azimuthal projection, and a good Homolocene is in the background of CBS's evening news broadcast. But if you're really concerned about how to look at the world, you should probably just buy a globe. You should probably just buy a globe.